This chapter will focus on attacks against an opponent's king when we are castled on the same side of the board, but unlike the previous one, it won't be enough with just bringing more pieces, more attackers. We will have to actually make some sacrifice or some destructive move against the opponent's defenses. So we're going to see a couple of examples, and we will start with these opening moves. We won't focus too much on them, but we will explain some of the details. So here, for instance, it's interesting to note that black, they can take the pawn and sort of survive, but it's not really that great. It's not a free pawn, because as we've seen in the chapters dedicated to attacking an uncastled king, white can continue with moves like rook e1 and d4, and it gets really annoying really fast for black because their king is still not castled, so on the center and vulnerable to this newly open file. Of course, feel free to analyze and go deep into these lines because they are interesting, and in fact it's a somewhat common opening. But yeah, we've already explored this idea of why it could be dangerous to get the open e file when black king is not castled and white already is and can place a rook on the open file. So instead of this, black went for the more normal move, just bringing the bishop away and continuing development. So like this with bishop d7. White continues, this move reinforces the center, so now the pawn is protected, and it also enables the activation of the bishop. Black develops yet another piece, knight g3, very normal move, and now black protects the central pawn as well. The idea is that this now liberates the knight, it's no longer occupied with the defense of this pawn, and the knight can come over here and try to be traded with this bishop. So why would black want to make that trade? This bishop, even though it seems a bit cornered, is actually a very dangerous piece because it's pointing at the enemy king or this pawn that is covering the king, and it will continue to do so after black castles. So it's actually a very powerful piece. That's the reason why white went a3. So now if the black knight comes over here, white can simply retreat, and there's no reason to worry about that. The knight is on the side of the board, not really doing anything. So that would be a bad idea for black, and they went instead for just castling. And now I will let you think for a couple of minutes about how you would continue as white. All right, so if you said bishop g5, that's a great move and probably the best one in the position, because if black isn't careful, we have a dangerous threat. So let's say black moves the rook here. Now what we gotta do is increase pressure on this knight because it's pinned, so it cannot move. We can play a move like knight d5, and now they cannot take it. And on the next move, we will be the one taking this knight and forcing black to disrupt these pawns in front of the enemy king. This pawn right here would have to move and to retake our bishop or our knight, and creating a lot of weak squares, a lot of weaknesses around the enemy king that our pieces will be able to exploit later. So yeah, bishop g5, great idea. And I think the best option for black is to just kick it away. But they still gotta be careful because against something like this, we can start considering sacrifices in this manner. So yeah, black is in a bit of trouble here and they will have to play really precisely. So maybe a defense like knight d4 would be okay, so that when we bring our knight, it can be taken. But yeah, we are really putting black into a lot of trouble. This is a high-level game, so even though the move is objectively good, it's not a trick or anything like that, it's a great move. But yeah, black would really find a good defense, and that's why white went for a bit of a more subtle move. So they played knight e2, rerouting the knight towards the king side. So like this, and maybe in the future occupying this square where it will be an interesting position to attack. You can see that it's targeting different points around the enemy king. So yeah, this is the move played in the game. Of course, there are many reasonable moves like knight d5 or like even bishop e3. But yeah, I think bishop g5 is the most interesting one. And knight e2 is also great. That's what they played in the game. And so black replied with h6, which is a move we gotta be really careful about when playing, and we will see in the game that it has its consequences. So the idea of h6 is to stop the idea of the ping, which, yeah, I mean, it's obviously we saw the danger it had, but it also has its downsides. And you will see that now a knight here, which is actually white's plan, is a more powerful move because it's hard to kick it away eventually. Black won't be able to deal with it. And for that matter, white of course played knight g3, rerouting the knight, continuing to look for d square. Black went on the defense, said, okay, you place the knight here, but I will take it with my own knight. And so how do we insist on the idea? What would you play here as white? Well, the move is knight h4, so that now if one knight gets traded, we can bring the other one. Of course, if you go back, so let's go here. I think it's interesting to consider moves like knight h4. So instead of knight g3, let's play knight h4 straight away, because it's a very similar idea. What happens if we bring our knight here? And I want to show you a somewhat typical theme, which has to do with this discovered attack of the queen against the knight. So here black would reply by capturing, the idea being that if we take back, they take our knight and we lost a pawn in the trade. So we've totally failed in our attacking idea. But here you may be wondering, okay, that's true, but what happens if I play my knight over here? So now we remove it from the attack and we are attacking the opponent's rook. And yeah, it's important to realize all these tactical themes. And here black has a crashing continuation, but it's not easy to find. So beware of these types of solutions in these positions. Here the move for black would be to take, attacking the queen, so no other realistic option other than capturing, and after check, takes. Now black has this move that wins the knight and leaves them with a massive advantage. So, okay, beware of these tricks. This is the reason why white played in this order. So knight here first, and now knight h4, because now with the knight in the way, the black's knight in the way, there's not really a discovered attack threat. All right, so black went for the move king h7, which tries to add some protection to this pawn in case the g pawn has to move, but I don't think it arrives on time. So after a move like knight f5, the g pawn cannot really move because this pawn would be still captured. So knight f5 is an interesting continuation, but white plays something that I think it's interesting and really illustrates the topics we want to discuss in this early part of the course about king safety. So I let you think, how would you continue? How would you, so far still in the same manner as the previous chapter, so how can we put the balance of forces in our favor? How can we have more attackers than defenders? How would you play here to do that? Okay, so as always, pause the video if you need to. And the move that was played in the game is a very interesting one, which is bishop e3. So now this has a couple of ideas. First, the most basic one is that if they take, we take. So we've traded the bishops. A somewhat passive bishop of ours against an active bishop of black, so great trade. And we also incorporate the rook into the attack. Now the rook has an open file or semi-open file. So it's playing. A couple of moves ago, it was just stuck behind the point. So this is the entire idea of the move. But it's also worth noting that if black plays something like retreating with the bishop, saying, okay, I want to open the file for the rook, then the queen can maybe start speculating with this type of sacrifices, especially if a knight has already arrived here. So it's not really a trick move, it's not a hope move, I hope that they take. It really has its powers, even if black doesn't fall for it. Alright, so in the game, black took the bishop anyway. And why is that so? I would say they were trying to continue with something like this, and we will talk about striking the center in future chapters. So I think black would be hoping for something like d5, and now in case maybe with a move like knight f5, black can just take and take the pawns in the center, and if we take back, now they can, sorry, if they take back, now black can trade queens, so this would release the pressure. However, here white went for a move that is devastating and gets a massive advantage. So I'd let you think for it 3-4 minutes, try to guess what it is, and then try to calculate all the consequences of playing that move. Okay, so the move that was played and is sort of the theme of this chapter is rook takes knight. So we've won a knight unless black recaptures. And now you can see that the king's castle is totally destroyed. We can access various different squares like this with no hopes of the enemy pawns ever kicking us out. So that's how the game continued. White plays the queen over here, trying to create an eventual threat. And now there were several options for black, but none of them really achieve much. So let's say a move like bishop here. Now white can simply take the pawn, because if the knight moves, then this is just crashing, and there's no way to stop white from capturing here eventually. So yeah, black would have to play a defensive move like moving the rook or maybe coming here, and white would just take again, and this is just too much advantage for white, and the attack continues. So in the game, well, we could consider a move like the rook over here, but still same ideas. We just take, this time with the queen. So in the game, they tried f5. So the intent of this move is to try to bring the queen to the defense. We will see now. So white took, and after trading the knights, white takes back. If they took with the knight, I think the idea would have succeeded with a move like queen g5, favoring a queen trade. So that's why white took with the queen instead. King moves, white takes this pawn, king moves again, and now there are different moves that give an advantage, but I think this is quite neat. So white went here. Of course, it wouldn't be good to do it this way because of the queen offering a trade. This could be annoying. Still in white's favor because we can check and not really trade or lose the knight or anything. But the move from the game is far clearer. We do it like this, and now if the queen comes, they aren't really offering a queen trade, so we can play the move that actually decides here the game. Which, well, think for a second, what would you play? And then we compare with the move that was actually played in the game. Okay, so the move was h4, because the queen doesn't really have any good squares to go. So if they go here, there's a fork, right? And if they go here instead, there's another fork. And well, here or here it would be taken. And if the queen leaves the g file, then we checkmate in one, right? With just queen over here. So that isn't really a good move. And the game ended after this. And white just took and forked, and the queen is lost. Let's now move on to a different example, even though the themes will be somewhat similar. And we have a somewhat regular position. Still no pawn or piece has been traded. Both sides have already castled and developed their pieces, or their minor pieces at least. And now white would play a plan that is somewhat similar to the previous one. They will reroute this knight into the king side. So like this. And they played knight e2, and after c5, knight g3. Even though you will notice that in this position, this square isn't really available, so I wouldn't say it's as obvious of a plan as before. But you will see that the knight here will help on the attack, and especially it will remove this defender eventually. So let's play a couple more moves. So black went queen c7, and white plays the knight over here. So yeah, black can trade it. It's a good position for the knight, so I think it's a good idea to trade. We can also explore what happens if they add some more pressure, but here white has a devastating idea, and that would be to just take, because now either taking with the queen or with the knight are both losing, so yeah, it's important to explore these variations, but well, if they take like this, I think you will find quite easily how to continue, because we would of course remove this knight and force the pawn to take, so we destroy the castle like before. And now, while there are several good continuations, we can check with the queen first, so like this and like that. And now this would be eventually winning. Of course, I don't really expect you to find the entire continuation, but only that the right idea was to take the knight and then create an attack. There were other options, of course. We don't have to check first. We can bring the knight here with this threat, for instance, and after black defends, this would be mate in two. So they will have to defend in some other way, maybe getting the king away, but yeah, we continue exactly the same. So we take, attack the queen, and then we bring our own queen. This is just a few lines to explore what would happen if we get to destroy the enemy's castle for free. They could also, of course, take with the knight to avoid all of that, but here we also have a really, really powerful move, and I will show the rest of the game first, and then we will come back here, because it's sort of related, so I don't really want to spoil the idea later on, and I want you to think about it at the spot. But we'll come back here and see how a similar continuation would win. Okay, so in the game, black took the knight, and white takes back, the queen moves. Again, they don't want to block with the bishop, because then we play the same idea. So the queen moved. White also played a queen move like this, and the idea is to keep this pawn defended in case black advances, either like this, or even let's say like this, so there aren't any tricks against our own king. And black went for the move a6, which starts an expansion on the queen side, and it's really hoping to play b5 and c4 and giving a lot of trouble to our bishop. And of course we could stop it with a natural move like a4, but the move in the game is actually far better. So as we said before, we want to remove this knight. But if we take it now, the bishop takes, and we don't really get any demolition of the enemy pawn structure around the king. That's why white went up for a very interesting move, which is knight to h5. Of course, if black does nothing, then we take and we achieve our goal, right? Either with the knight or the bishop. So the obvious question is, all right, but what happens if black takes first? What if we play like this? And against this move, black can defend by blocking the view of our bishop. And of course, the position is still complicated, but black also can have an attack by moving these pawns and releasing this diagonal. So is this really so bad for black? It is, and before exploring why, I think we should consider other alternatives to this pawn move. So if black tries to defend like this, then we can bring our queen, threatening mating one, and I let you think, what should white play here to win? Okay, so white should take, and after takes, we take, only move, and now the rook lifts itself to finish the job. You can see we destroyed the black king's position, or the pawns around the black king, and now we get basically a highway to attack with our own pieces. But there's another alternative. Okay, so if this pawn can't move, why don't we just bring this one here? And this is maybe a bit more resisting, but we just bring the rook and eventually we get the win. So by bringing our rook to add more pressure, we eventually get a winning position. So let's say black tries this counter attack, we can just bring the rook here, and there are just way too many threats. Not really way to stop this capture, and this capture that is also a bit threatened because the g pawn is pinned, this pawn over here is pinned. There's just way too much. So even a move like this, we can simply counter by taking and still threatening checkmate. Okay, so we can see that in this variation, the only move that saves the day is pawn to f5, and yeah, black still has to be careful, but at least there's a defense. So maybe the bishop can come here, and we're still playing moves that don't really destroy all of the structure, all of the pawns around the black's king. We can still keep them somewhat safe. So this will be the right defense. And of course, feel free to analyze or even ask questions in the comments about as many lines as you want. They are all interesting to explore. But everything I tell you so far is a lie, because after we play the move knight h5 like this and black recaptured, we've only really explored taking with the queen. So recapture, white is the one doing the recapturing, sorry. But there is actually an alternative. And the alternative is, what if we ignore the knight? What if we just destroy the black king's position? And this is indeed what happened in the game. But we need to be careful because, okay, we are one piece down now. We only have a pawn for a bishop. We really need something to either regain the material or deliver checkmate, because otherwise we've done a silly sacrifice. We've just lost material for nothing. And if we play a move like rook f3, this is exactly what will happen. Black would maybe bring the pawn to f6 to block our bishop's way. Even though it's a bit weakening, it also opens up an escape for the king, so not a bad move at all. And if we bring the bishop back, well, there would be several possibilities. We can come back and offer a queen trade, and then let the queen help with the defense somehow. So it's clear that white needs something more. We can't just keep playing calmly and normally. And the move that was played was yet another sacrifice to expose the black king even more than it already is. And the move that was played was the brilliant bishop takes g7. So it's threatening mate, so only option is to take. And now white has to be precise, because against a move like rook f3 that would look natural, black can maybe bring their own rook and open up an escape route to the black king. Note that white is 2 bishops down, so we really need something huge to get back the advantage. And so that's why white played this queen check before, because this forces the black king to the h file. It's cut off from the rest of the board. A move like king f6 is obviously losing for white. I hope you can see why. Losing for black, sorry. And so after a move like king h7, which is the correct defense, of course, white can now bring the rook and try to finish off the game. Except, as we were talking before, white has sacrificed 2 bishops. So, yeah, if you get mate, it's great, but maybe black can sacrifice something in return to stop the attack. And that's indeed what happened. I will let you try to think for a few minutes, take as much time as you need, maybe take 5-10 minutes, take a long time here to think as black. You have this position as black now. How do you play a defensive move? How can you try to survive? And what happens after that defensive move? What are the consequences? All right, so the correct defense here for black is the move that was played in the game, which is e5, trying to bring the queen into the defense. A move like interposing a bishop here doesn't really work because, well, white can simply take and go back to the same idea. And there aren't any useful rook moves, so the only way is to put the queen in the way. And the continuation that happened in the game is rook h3 check, black blocks, white takes, and now you could go, okay, so we have a queen and 2 pawns for a rook and 2 bishops, so it's not really a huge disadvantage. This is still a somewhat playable game. Unfortunately for black, white has a devastating move here, which is queen d7, attacking both bishops. And now it's basically lost for black. There's really not hope, because they are gonna, on top of all that happened, lose a bishop too. You can see that the game continued like this until eventually there's just too much advantage, and white is also continuing the attack. And here they take finally the rook. So we can see that here, even though e5 allows for a bit more of survival, it's objectively the best move, it's still losing for black, even though it's a resource we really have to take into account. Because if we go back to the moment where we sacrificed the bishop, or even when we offered the knight trade, it's not really a move a good player would do if they haven't seen all of that already. So this is why calculation is so important in chess, and precise, concrete calculation. Because if they had missed the final fork on both bishops, then maybe white would have considered that this wasn't worth going for. So that's why we need to be as precise as possible. And you can see that there are many moves involved here. Obviously, I don't expect players at this level, like yourself or even like myself, to find every single detail. But I want you to realize that at our own level, we should always try to be as precise, to know as much about the move we are playing as we possibly can, and decide based on our best judgment with the information we have. Okay, so let's now go back a few moves to this position where we were exploring this variation, and black took our knight with their own knight. So I want you to think, how would you continue here as white? And as we said before, take a long time to think and try to find the ultimate consequence of your moves. You won't be able to find everything, or you probably won't, but it's still worth doing this exercise of trying to find as much as we can, so that when we have maybe a simpler version of this position, we are exploring high-level games, then we can maybe solve it completely, or at least get enough information to play the good move. All right, so welcome back. I hope you thought for a long time and gathered a lot of knowledge about different lines. And I will now show you how to destroy black's position here. Of course, a move like queen g4 would have been playable, but black can survive. So maybe a move like g6 and maybe at some point f5, even though it's a bit weakening, the pieces can maybe do the job of the pawns and black can live on and play the game. Instead, the winning move is to just capture here, now check, and now again we play the same idea, we sacrifice. Because, well, if they take, we have queen check, and now we have a great move, which is knight f5. And knight f5, it threatens mate in two different ways. So the only real option to stop it is to take it. And now we play our rook maneuver. So this would seem like it's unstoppable, but actually black can try bringing back the knight. So now if we check, they just block. But of course this doesn't really work because we can simply take the knight and go back to the same story. Okay, so this is great. Fortunately, if we go back to this move, here capturing the bishop isn't mandatory. Black could try to open up an escape route for the king. Still, white has a really great position, so we shouldn't be capturing the rook straight away because we've given up way too much material, so probably not worth it. Instead, we should play this quietish move, queen g6, which is still threatening to take, also taking here, and also maybe bringing the knight into the attack. So against some silly move like, I don't know, rook here, we can simply retreat with the bishop and this will be a discovered checkmate. So there isn't really a good defense against everything. So a move like rook here can be countered in several different ways. So maybe we want to play bishop here and just take with the queen. So now we are an exchange up. So we have a rook and two pawns for a knight. So this is good enough. I was trying to search if there was some mate I had not seen when preparing this lesson, but yeah, this is just simple enough. So yeah, you can see that if they don't take the bishop, we have a winning position. If they take it, we have forced checkmate. So this is more than enough to conclude that this bishop sacrifice was actually the move to play, was actually correct. Okay, so this will be the end of the videos about the king safety part of this course. We will have one more, which will be the solutions to the exercises that you can find on the Lichess study. That will be, of course, linked in the description as always. And after that, we'll move on to the next topic, which will be piece activity. Still, I hope you don't really get overwhelmed by the complexity of these examples. I was trying to illustrate the ideas. Sometimes they will appear in simpler forms, sometimes in more complex forms, but I really wanted to give you an overview that covered many different situations you could possibly be facing. So it wouldn't be enough with just toy examples. We need to see actual high quality battles to see how this plays out.